Hello, 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 everyone. Thank you all for joining. And for those of you who are going to be watching the replay. So, you know what to do. Let me know that you are here. Just kind of shout me out where you are joining from. Tonight, we're going to be talking about depression versus grief. I hope you all had a great holiday. Let me know how your holiday was. Put that in the chat as well. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. For those of you who do not know me, I am Lena Lassiter. I have my master's in human services counseling with a concentration in crisis and trauma. I am an advanced grief recovery method specialist, a director in corporate, author and founder and president of Forever Healed. We are a nonprofit organization, and what we do is we help those who are suffering from pain associated with unresolved grief. We want them to reclaim, we want them to restore, we want them to recover. And we do that in several different ways. We offer one-to-one and grief and group grief recovery classes. We also go into corporate America and we talk about grief, empathy, and healing. We are proud partners of the Richmond Police Department Homicide Support Group. We are advocates for homicide survivors, and we are proud partners of the Richmond City Jail. So thank you for joining me tonight. Hi, Tanya. Thank you so much for joining. Hope you had a great holiday, sis. Thank you for always supporting. Thank you, Minister Ross, for joining. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So tonight, we're going to be talking about grief versus depression. Quite a few clients will ask us, hey, how do I know if this is grief, versus depression? I don't know. So tonight we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna navigate through that. So again, if you're just joining in, we're gonna be talking about grief versus depression because of all the questions we get around this topic. Give me a shout out. Let me know that you are here and where you are watching from. Again, this is very interactive, so please send me your questions, your comments, your thoughts throughout this session, and I'll be more than happy to address how you are feeling and questions that you may have. So thank you, Sis Pat. Thank you again for always joining and always supporting. I love you. I cannot wait to see what God is going to do with you. You're going to reap everything that you sow, and you're always supporting others. So I can't wait for God to expand your territory. So tonight we're going to be talking about grief versus depression. Okay. So if that's okay with you guys tonight. All right. So we're going to talk about the differences between the two. Even during our intake process, when we have a new client, we want to make sure that they don't have depression. Why? Because we don't want to cause any additional trauma with the grief work that we may have them participate in. So it's very important that we even know before we take on new clients if it's truly grief or if it's depression. So we will ask them questions to clarify the same, because again, the last thing I want to do is to cause any additional trauma to someone who may be depressed. Okay. Now we're not licensed to diagnose depression. So when we ask the questions, we're not trying to diagnose, but if they have symptoms of depression or if they tell us that they feel like that they're depressed, then we tell them to go consult with a mental health professional who could diagnose depression. So I want to chat briefly before we jump in on this topic, if you guys don't mind. Can I just have a soapbox a moment? Because I want to talk briefly about some social media posts that I have personally seen. And these sessions, again, right? I told someone the other day, this is not a show. I don't want this to be a show. I don't want to come out here to entertain you. I want to come out here to bring hope. I want to come out here to educate. I want to come out here to bring truth. I want to come out here to promote healing. So with that being said, I just want to talk about something that I saw on social media just to educate, not to judge, not to criticize whoever put it out there, but I just want to educate. And I think it ties in nicely with this topic. Hi, Tanya. Thanks for your continued support. Hi, author Regina. Thank you so much for your continued support. So the post that I'm referring to that I have seen on social media, and some of you may have seen this. And again, I think it's just a ripe topic to educate. Again, I'm educating you because of what we're talking about tonight. But the post disturbed me, my heart. It disturbed my heart because it was a picture of celebrities who had taken their lives. And in this collage, they were all kind of smiling, right? And the caption was, "This is what depression looks like." Now, while I understand what the writer was trying to convey, so what they were trying to say, I think, because again, I'm not in their head, what I think they were trying to say is that sometimes people can be smiling and we don't know, that they're going through depression. So now let me just ask you, or to ask you to just consider something with that. So think about that, right? This is a post, and the caption is saying, "This is what depression looks like." And you have entertainers, out here who have taken their own lives. Here's what I want you to consider before posting or reposting things like that. Number one, depression is not a face. It's not a look. It's a mental disorder that affects how you feel, it affects how you act, and it affects how you behave. It's not a face. So what I saw on that post was, I saw the face of somebody's husband. I saw the face of somebody's son. I saw the face of somebody's mother. I saw the face of somebody's daughter who may have been grieving, that loss. So again, I understand what they were trying to convey. But again, I just caution us, guys, educate ourselves and to think about the things that we post and we repost. Depression doesn't have a face. There's no look. It's an internal feeling that impacts how somebody acts, how they behave, and how they feel. Okay? It's an internal feeling. It's not a face. Also, not everyone who commits suicide is depressed. Not everyone who commits suicide is depressed. Well, Lena, what do you mean by that? Could be somebody with an illness, and they know that they're going to pass away, and they don't want to suffer, and they make a conscious decision that they want to take their lives. So again, let's just be careful, guys, as we talk through this tonight, right? And I'm going to get off this in a second, but it just bothered me when I saw that post on social media to say this is the face of depression. No, those weren't the faces of depression. Depression is not a face. It's an internal feeling. And again, not everyone who commits suicide is depressed. So the bottom line is we need to show up for those who we know need us. And we need to listen to those who we know may not express, their needs. So just listen to what's not being said. All right. All right. So now that I have gotten that off my chest, y'all okay with me saying that? Let's jump into our discussion. Is there a difference between grief and depression? Hi, Adrian. Thank you so much for joining tonight. I see you. Thank you so much. Yes. So let's talk about it. So what is grief? What is grief? Grief is a natural response to any loss, and it can include physical, cognitive, emotional behavior, and our spiritual being, right? So a natural response to any loss, including a physical loss, cognitive loss, emotional loss, behavior, or spiritual loss. Remember, grief is the conflicting feelings behind the end of or change in a familiar pattern or behavior. So that loss doesn't necessarily mean that we had to lose somebody, due to death, but it could be loss of health, loss of self, divorce, relationship losses, right? Any of those things. So depression. What is depression? It's a clinical condition diagnosed by a medical professional, which meets a certain number of or a combination of symptoms that present nearly every day for 2 weeks. So a licensed professional will ask you a battery of questions and symptoms and ask you if they're present and if they have been for every day for 2 weeks. Okay. So I want to talk through some of the symptoms that you may feel if you are depressed. And again, this is not an all exclusive list. It's not an inclusive list. Some people could experience additional symptoms, but there's usually you feel irritable. There's loss of interest or pleasure in activities. Sometimes your sleep pattern is off. So maybe you're not sleeping or you're sleeping too much. Maybe you're sluggish in your movement. Maybe you just feel exhausted. You just feel fatigue, right? Loss of energy and feelings of worthlessness. Sometimes people feel guilty, and it's a recurrent feeling. Sometimes you may have suicidal thoughts or thoughts of death, again, just reoccurring. And then sometimes you can just have impairment in your functionality. And what I mean is you just don't even have enough energy to bathe yourself. You don't have enough energy to even comb your hair, to brush your teeth, to do the natural, normal daily activities. You just can't do them. You just can't. You have no energy to do those. So again, for those of you who are just joining us tonight, we're talking about depression versus grief. How do I know if this is depression versus grief? So let's jump right in. Identifiable loss. That's the first thing. So usually with grief, there is a specific loss that the person can point to, right? I lost my pet. I got a divorce, loss of expectation in a relationship. Somebody passed away. There is an identifiable loss in grief. Okay. And in terms of depression, there may or may not be a specific loss identified. So that's the first thing, identifiable loss. Okay. Number one. Number two is our focus. So typically, if you're grieving, your focus is going to be on who or what was lost. Who or what was lost. If it's depression, the focus will be on you, self. Right? Oh, I feel this way. I feel this way. You know, it's all about you, right? What's going on with you? That's where the focus is going to be. The third thing is, can you feel pleasure? Are you still feeling pleasure? So when it comes to grief, there may be a fluctuating ability to feel pleasure, right? So some days you may feel pleasure, right? And then sometimes if you are grieving what or who was lost, then you may not be able to, right? If you are depressed, there's typically an inability to feel pleasure. And again, I want to say that all of us are unique and individual, right? So I'm not saying that everyone who's depressed will feel this way. But most of the time, if you're depressed, then there's this inability to feel pleasure, right? Nothing makes you happy. You just cannot snap out of it. Okay. So number 4, being around others. So when you are grieving, you may find comfort in being close to other people. Just somebody sitting around, just somebody who come and just sit with me, right? Somebody who just pick up the phone and say, hey, I was thinking about you. That may bring you some comfort. Typically in depression, there's persistent isolation from others. And guess what? Sometimes there's isolation from self. You don't even know who you are anymore. So there's that isolation. Okay. So number 5, the ability to feel. Typically, when it comes to grief, you're able to feel a wide range of emotions, right? And again, you may feel some guilt over some aspect of the loss, right? I wish I would have said this. I wish I would have done that differently, right? So you will have those feelings. When in depression, and this is one question I ask clients, potential clients who call me, they say they feel stuck. That's a red flag for me, right? So it's just these fixed emotions on feeling stuck, and or generalized feelings of this guilt in it. So I have to probe and ask a few more questions to make sure that they're not in a state again of depression. So I just want to recap really quick. Hope you guys are still with me. If you are enjoying this, let me know. If you have questions, please stop me. So number one, identifiable loss. Activities. With grief, it may fluctuate. With depression, you may have a hard time around others when you're grieving, typically. And some people, even when they grieve, they want to be alone. So again, remember, we're all different. We're unique, right? So this is not me saying you put on this one coat and it just one size fits all, right? Typically, when you're grieving, the comfort of being around others usually will help you to feel better. If it's depression, typically it's this total isolation, right? You pretty much even lost touch with who you are. Number five, the ability to feel. If you're grieving, you may feel a wave of emotions to even include guilt, depressed, usually feeling stuck, right? And this generalized feeling of guilt, like whatever you're feeling, you just feel stuck in it. Like you cannot move, you can't see beyond that. I see we have a comment. Okay, thank you, Tanya. Tanya said yes, that's good. All right. So let's keep going. Number six, and guess what? We're almost there. Number six, self-esteem. So grief, self-esteem is usually preserved after the loss, right? So you start feeling yourself, feeling better about yourself, right? After what or who was lost, after some time, right? After you have gone through your healing work or your healing process, whatever that looks like for you, you start to kind of build that self-esteem back up. And depression, typically there's feelings of worthlessness and self-loathing, right? Why am I here? What's my purpose? I don't understand. A lot of people say that they have a call and they have a purpose. I feel worthless. I'm better off dead, right? And it's just usually just low self-esteem, right? I'm not worth anything. I don't do anything right. Right. And those are the conversations that people will have with themselves. Number seven, thoughts of death. With grief, the thoughts of death are typically going to be related to who or what was lost. Right. So that person is not around. It's Christmas. That person's not around. It's their birthday. Right. That person is not around. Maybe how they passed away, or again, what we lost. With depression, the thoughts of death are going to be related to, again, feeling worthless, feeling like you're undeserving of or unable to cope with whatever's going on, right? You can't see beyond that immediate pain. So you may have suicidal thoughts, or you're thinking about death a lot in terms of you not being here. And some individuals will actually tell themselves that they're probably better off, not here, or their family is probably better off if they're not here. But again, everyone who commits suicide is not necessarily depressed. So I definitely want to make sure I nail that in. Miss Pat said, okay, I now understand the differences between the two. Thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome. How can you help someone that is depressed? So here's what I would say. Again, we're not going to know if they're depressed until they go and get evaluated by a doctor. But if someone is having some of those symptoms that we talked about earlier, then I would encourage them to contact a licensed mental health care practitioner. NAMI is another great source, and I'll put those up at the end of this presentation. It's National Alliance on Mental Illness. They have a 24-hour crisis, hotline. And if someone is actually in a crisis, or they're in a suicidal state, I think sometimes for some of us, it's uncomfortable to ask somebody if they have a plan to commit suicide. But you know what? That's the right thing to do. Ask them that. So to ask them, do you feel suicidal? But also ask them if they have a plan. So if someone say, yeah, I have thoughts of suicide. Well, do you have a plan on how you would do it? And if they say yes, you may need to call a hotline or you have them call a hotline. So Tanya, very good question. So thank you so much for asking that question. So again, depression is a clinical condition and has to be diagnosed by a physician. So again, they may feel irritable, loss of interest and pleasure in activities, sleeping too much, or some people will be up for 2 days. I mean, and it's real. Sometimes sluggish movement, fatigue, loss of energy, feeling of worthlessness, guilt, recurrent thoughts of death, suicidal thoughts. We want to take those very seriously. And one individual who asked me to even do this live said that they were having a hard time just getting out of the bed. So I wanted to talk to you. What if it's your child? Yeah, and depending on how old the child is, time. So that's a great question, right? So if you have a younger child who's experiencing some of those symptoms that we talked about, call their pediatrician to let them know so that they can kind of connect you with the correct mental health professional, age appropriate for your child. Now, if your child is an adult, I would just ask them questions, right? Do you feel like this? Do you feel depressed? And just have that open dialogue with them. And here's what I would say to them. Your mental health is important because you know what? If you were to fracture your leg, you would go to a hospital, you would get it set, and you would allow it to heal. But for some reason, when it comes to mental health, it's a stigma. And we have to break that. So, I would encourage my child to say, you know what? I want you healthy. I want you healthy. And if you need me to go with you to your doctor, because again, if they're an adult, they have to go themselves, right? We can't force them to go. We can't make them go because guess what, Tanya? If they do go and they put on medication, you can't force them to even take it. So it's great to just have those conversations to let them know that there's no stigma, that mental health is just as serious as your physical health, and that you're going to be there with them to kind of talk them through it. But I also would encourage to try to get to the root of it, right? So I'm not on here to push medication. I'm not on here to discourage medication. I think that that's something that's a personal choice and that you have to pray about and do what's best for you and your family. But I will say that it's important to get to the root of what's causing the depression. And sometimes it is losses over time because we get that question as well, right? So sometimes that's where kind of grief and depression kind of like, oh, it's kind of hard to decipher because sometimes it's because of all the losses. Someone, yeah, absolutely can feel, depressed. So that's my recommendation. Talk with them, support them, let them know that it's a brave thing to go and take care of their mental health. And especially if they come to you and say, I'm having a hard time concentrating, a hard time coping. You know what? I noticed that as well. Why don't we go and, and speak with someone because you could be depressed and it's okay. It's okay to go talk to someone about that because I want you healthy and I want you whole and I want you here. So that's how I would handle that. You are welcome. And I love you as well. I love you as well. Yeah, it's tough. All right. So again, if you or someone are experiencing any of the symptoms that we discussed earlier and you feel that you may be depressed, again, please reach out to a mental health professional to be assessed and treated. Your mental health is just as important as your physical health. So here are some of the resources I talked about earlier. National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI. So that's NAMI.org. And then we have 988 Suicide and the Crisis Line. Can't get any easier than that, right? 988. And if you or someone again, are just kind of struggling with just several losses, unresolved grief, you can reach out to us at 684-1113 or foreverhealed.com, or you can email us at contactus@foreverhealed.com. Again, I don't take it lightly that you guys jump on when we go live. Thank you for your ongoing support. Thank you for your questions and topic ideas. If there are no more questions, we're going to go ahead and let you go. I just pray that each of you have a peaceful night. Again, if you feel that this broadcast will help someone else, I just would ask you to do me a big favor if you wouldn't mind just sharing it for us. Thank you again for joining me tonight. I want each of you to have a peaceful rest, and I love you all. And I see a comment coming in. My friend was the opposite. Yep, she gave me a party the night before. She committed suicide. Yeah. So again, Regina, like I said earlier, everybody who commits suicide, I mean, they're not depressed. But it sounds like, she had a plan. Like she planned it out. She knew what she wanted to do, and she knew what she wanted to accomplish, before she decided to do that. And that's why I said earlier, when I saw that Facebook post, it kind of bothered me to say this is the face of depression, because that it's not accurate. And it's not accurate to put everybody in this bubble and to say everybody who commits suicide will have these certain, symptoms or, things that you should have picked up on. You don't know what's going through somebody's head. You don't know what diagnosis somebody was just given. You don't know what financial crisis somebody is in. You don't know what bullying somebody has endured. You don't know. We don't know, right? So we can't put them all in the same bucket. So again, I'm just sorry to hear that about your friend. But again, some people have it planned out. I lost a friend who called me about another family member. Had no idea that this person was getting ready to take their life. And guess what? He took his life. And that bothered me, because you called me to help someone else, but you didn't share with me that you were going through. So it happens. You're welcome, Sis Pat, for the nuggets. You are so welcome. You're welcome, Tanya. You are healed. You are healed. We have the mind of Christ. You are healed. And again, I think what's important is that you have to get to the root of it. Like, right? What are your triggers? What's the root of it? And recognizing it and knowing that it's okay to go and get help. It's okay. Your mental health is just as important as your physical health. So I know this was a heavy topic, but I think it was a needed topic, because we get this question all the time. How do I know if this is grief versus depression? So we hope this was educational session was helpful to you all tonight. Again, have just peaceful rest tonight. I love each and every one of you, and thank you so much for your continued support. Amen. Peaceful rest, guys. Good night.